Listeners' discretion is advised as we'll be talking about mental health issues. If anyone out there is struggling with any mental health issues, call Lifeline on 131114 and please reach out to your family and friends. G'day, welcome to True Blue History. I'm Adam Bloom. Today's special guest is Gwen Cherne. Gwen is the Veteran Family Advocate Commissioner, and in her role, she advocates for Australian war widows and veterans' families for suicide prevention and mental health awareness. Gwen will also be sharing her own personal story and experiences of family trauma. Hi, Gwen. Thanks for joining us on the show.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thank you, Gwen. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on. So, Gwen, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Sure. Grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, hence the accent, but was a very determined little kid. So moved my parents around so that I could figure skate competitively. So when I was 13, came downstairs and demanded that I move to Florida to be with my coaches, and my parents said yes, which is shocking. I would definitely not do that for my children, so I do appreciate them. But yeah, and then moved around quite a bit. But in terms of my childhood, grew up on Lake Erie, which meant that it snowed heaps. 2 feet of snow outside was not rare. Traipsed to school in a foot of snow all the time, and had to go out and clean the cars off and get the ice off the windshields and heat them up before you could even open the the car door in the morning. And I skated from 4:30 in the morning until 8, and then went to school and then went back to the rink afterward. So really serious ice skater growing up. 2 older brothers, and I think that was my ice skating was mostly because I wanted a life of my own. My brothers were competitive athletes as well. They were hockey players and traveled all through Canada and the US, and were on, what do they call them here? Like, there's the special teams. They're the representative teams. They were on things like that. There, we call them different things in the States. And yeah, it was interesting to sort of go, no, I need something for me. And then it just became ice skating, became my life. And also for me, it was an escape. My family had a lot of violence and trauma. My dad had post-traumatic stress and moral injury from Vietnam. He was in the Air Force there. And I apologize if your sound is catching my dog and his cute little toes on the dials.
That's okay.
But he... it was my way of escaping all that anger and trauma, and knowing from this time to that time, I'm in a safe place where I can focus on me and worry about me and not have to deal with any of that.
So for you, obviously you mentioned your dad being a Vietnam veteran. Did that shape your childhood and going forward in your life?
Almost definitely. I mean, I married my dad. In many ways, except my dad liked to weave a story a bit more than Pete did, even more than Pete did, I should say. But definitely, I think my parents, because my dad had gone out and seen a bit of the world, and loved what he saw of the world, and couldn't afford to do that while I was growing up. But he really pushed all of us to go and follow our dreams and do whatever we could. And I think he regretted leaving the forces when he did to marry my mom. I think he would have preferred if he'd lived, a military life his whole life and not just for a number of years. But I think that just meant for him that we needed to follow our dreams and not give up on them. And so he pushed us to do that.
So you went, obviously high school, and then what did you do when you first left high school? Go to university, or what did you do?
So I was in a car accident when I was 17, last year, year 12. of high school, and then ended up going to Boston College for uni. More snow.
You love chasing snow, don't you?
Yeah, apparently. Well, I loved Florida. That's where I went to high school. But yes, then went straight back to the snow and even more snow. And it was cold and beautiful. And I think that the change of seasons brings awe and wonder into the world. And that I think, in smaller doses. And that was really a draw for me. It was also a huge uni town. So lots of fun, lots of college students there and uni students there. And went to uni and went to Ecuador for my junior year and learned a lot about serving others while I was in uni, and what that meant in terms of, going to communities where they didn't have running water in the United States. I worked with Habitat for Humanity, which a lot of people have heard about. I worked with a home in West Virginia where there's a women's state prison there. And I believe that's where Martha Stewart was. And I worked and helped refurbish the house where all the families stay when they go down to visit because they can't afford to stay in a hotel. So they would come in and out while we were there, and we painted and helped and went down and met some of the prisoners and got to learn what some of their stories were. And so that just started to spark in me this idea of leading your life in a way that was of service to others. And I saw how much that made me happy, made me feel connected in the world, and also gave me more than I felt like I was giving, even though, I kept trying to give more, I kept getting more and more back.
It's funny that when you say that it's the fulfillment of when we give to others, it's a feeling inside of you that, when you make someone's day, or it's something that I get through my RFS and giving back to the community, and it's in any form that we, whether you serve, whatever you do, it's helping others, and I can see with you that's what it is. And you end up in Afghanistan. How did you come to go to Afghanistan?
So I was, after uni, I went to Chile and was there for 2 years working as a social worker at a children's center, and then ended up back in New York City with my boyfriend at the time. And really, it was all about, I went, honestly, to work for a Jesuit priest. And I know, and start, a lot of people don't know that, and start a school for kids from low-income families. And they were kids from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and they came from school areas and schools where 1/3 of them didn't graduate from high school. They were, surrounded by people who were told, you're going to jail, you're never going to make anything of yourself. And looking at their lives, you can see where they would believe that. And these schools were charter schools that basically invested longer hours in the kids, tutoring, summer camps, all these things, and belief in them that you can be, and dream and live and help your families and go and serve the world in whatever capacity. You can serve the world as a photographer, as a filmmaker, as a businessman, businesswoman. I mean, I taught an all-boys school, so that's why I said businessmen. But the point is, these schools really instilled in these kids that they could actually overcome adversity. They were latchkey kids, which meant their parents worked 2 and 3 jobs just to survive in New York City in really poor conditions in a single bedroom home with 5 people. And yet, you can come from anywhere and still become whatever you want if you've got love and support and positivity and opportunity around you. And I think oh my goodness. Sorry. But I think I've gotten lost a little bit in the question. But so my time, how did I get to Afghanistan? So my time there just meant I was going deeper and deeper into, what is the cycle of poverty? How do I want to serve this world? Who do I want to be? And ended up going to graduate school and meeting a couple of crazy chicks who decided that they would ask me to come to Afghanistan in December of 2006 and help them on a project. So I got a visa, paid for my flight to Kabul, and took off on a pretty scary plane that, the overhead compartment was taped up, and the chair in front of me I had to hold up with my knees the whole time, and I wasn't sure we were going to take off, but we did.
Sounds like a real great adventure, but when you told your family that you were going to Afghanistan and going into an active war zone, what were their reactions?
Of course you are. I mean, I don't think my dad slept for 3.5 years. But like, I think he was worried. But I don't think it was a surprise to them. They always knew that I was doing, I'd gone to Ecuador instead of the Netherlands or Australia for my uni study abroad. I'd gone to Chile instead of going, to New York City after uni. They were just like, of course you are. You're just doing all of these things that they got used to, whatever it was that I would say. And they go, okay, right. And so we're on board, and what can we do? And how can we help? And you're crazy. We love you, but... and I think it was curiosity. They were really curious what it was going to be like. And my dad, I think, because he knew I was never going to join the forces, mostly because I don't take commands well, felt like it was one of his children who were following in his footsteps a little, and, trying to connect with what he'd seen and done a little bit.
So what were your first thoughts when you actually got into country and had boots on the ground in Afghanistan? What was that experience like for you?
Freezing cold. I have never been so cold in my entire life.
But you've grown up in the snow.
I mean, it didn't matter. It was deep, deep cold in your bones, wet. There's no warmth in the buildings unless you're sitting around a fire. So they have bukharis, which are basically open flames in a little tin can with a pipe that goes outside, and they drip diesel fuel into the fire, like one drop at a time to keep the fire burning. And that is the warmth that you get. So there were days where we would work from our beds. Like in the same room, there would be 3 of us in the bed working from the bed on our laptops because it was that cold. And you were like fully dressed in sweater and pants and socks, and you were still cold.
It's just
I'm talking a lot about being cold here, but that is one of the first memories. And the other was, our pipes froze. So there was no running water. There was no light when I walked into the airport, and they threw our bags through on the normal conveyor belt. They just threw them through a hole in the wall, and you went and picked them up. And they, stamped, you stand in line, and then they stamp it, and there's no computers, there's no nothing. And I was like, when I left Afghanistan, it was different, but it was going back in time.
Like back to almost like medieval times, or like probably not medieval, but back like decades. Like
Decades back, yeah. And in many cases, you could call it that. In some areas it was, no running water, no windows into the external outside world from just their community.
What was it like with the local people? Did you have great interaction with the locals?
I was really lucky. I didn't work or live on military bases for the most part. So I lived in the city in Kabul and got driven around in pickup trucks, and occasionally had, the first 2-3 times I was there, had Afghans who would drive us around, who were local members, and take us to markets, and, and we met their families, and it was lovely.
Did you feel, when you were over there, did you feel a sense of always being safe? Like you felt safe while you were over there, or were you constantly on edge that something could happen?
The first 2 times I don't think I slept. Like you sleep with one eye open. And that was a really interesting experience. It was because I was a very good sleeper in my young adulthood. It's a good introduction to children, actually.
I was just about to say that.
Where you have a newborn and you're literally like, half of your brain is just waiting for them to cough or sneeze, or, are they still breathing? And you can hear them. Yeah. And it was that, like all night long, every night. This just, am I okay? Am I safe? Am I okay? Am I safe? And making sure, the curtains were drawn in case there was an explosion and the glass wouldn't fly, and making sure your bedroom was away from the window and you had boots next to the bed, closed-toed shoes next to the bed, and a bag near the door so that if you had to run, you could. All of that was reality. So you were always on guard, which takes a toll. The cortisol that's released in your body because you are constantly, hyper alert, is the part of the veteran experience I really get.
So how do you come back, and now obviously you live in Australia, how do you just switch that off and go, does it stay with you for a long time being or do you then get accustomed and get used to living a normal life back in Australia after you've been in a war zone?
So I think toward the end, I was wearing Birkenstocks in my office, and much to my security contractor at the end of my time in Afghanistan, I'd walk around barefoot in the office, and they were like, you just cannot do that. So, I always I think because I didn't have children, because I was, I'm not 6 foot tall. I felt 6 foot tall and invincible, even though I definitely knew I wasn't, because we had lost some really beautiful people that I was close to and loved dearly while I was there. I knew it was possible, but I also took the risk and wasn't willing to live that hypervigilance all the time. That last time I was there, I also had a phenomenal security team who I just trusted. And while we were aware and hyper aware of things, we could let our guards down because they didn't ever.
I can see it. I can see that they say you get accustomed to the environment that you're in, and you did. As you said, the first 2 times you were asleep with your eye open, and then the last time you sort of relaxed a little bit, and it was just normal life. And I can see that you speak to some veterans that say, when they went back multiple times, they were hyper vigilant the first tour, the second tour, it's okay, it's, and I can see it.
I know this. Yeah. Like, this is the environment. I know what looks strange, what doesn't look right, what doesn't feel right. You learn to trust your gut, all that stuff. And you learn the risks you're willing to take. So there were times when there would be an explosion in the city and the security contractors would lose their minds, because the first question for people wasn't, frankly, is everyone okay? That was the first question. And what was the impact? And, is everyone safe? Question 1. Question 2, when can I go out? And it was all about their mental health and their sanity. When can I re-engage with community, with life outside, with work, because I can't stay cooped up in this house, and staying here and staying alive isn't worth my mental health deteriorating, and everyone in Australia knows, like, staying in your home and leaving and the risk, we were weighing it up. I need to go to the shops. I want to go out to a pub because 10 people can get together. I have to sit down, not wear my mask. What is the risk I'm willing to take to keep sane and engage in the world? And those were the same, cost benefit analysis we were doing.
It's interesting you say that, because COVID, it was that you were like, do I go out? Don't I go out? Do I, and then I think what and being locked down, and there's so many people that struggled mentally through COVID. I thrived, and I got used to my own company. I was okay with my own company, and I felt that, and I've spoken to you off air, and we've spoken in depth of my mental health struggles, but I feel that if a few years ago, if I have had that happen, I don't think I would have been able to cope as well as I did. And I feel now with COVID, it's that we've learned to live with it, and it's now same as when you're like, do we go out? Do we not? Like, you take the risk and you take the chance, and life's all about living. Like, and I can see with you, it's like, well, hey, okay, there's been an explosion, but let's get back, let's get out there, and let's get on with the job that we're here to do.
Well, and some of it was social. I won't the expat life in there was very different than the veteran experience. There were restaurants, there were nightclubs, there were things you could actually do that were in a house, a compound. So basically, a house with a big, huge wall around it. For those civilian listeners who don't know what that is, and some veterans who never got to see those. So there is that lifestyle as well. The UN had a pool, and so the security contractors and the UN staff and all the NGO workers would go there on Fridays, which was our only day off, and hang out. And it was something that people needed. They needed to immerse themselves in water in such a dry, barren country. In the summer, it was just this huge reprieve. And when you're working 6 days a week and you're not around your family, you live there. You get small breaks, but you live there for years at a time. And so you need that social connection. You need those breaks. You need to get that nature and water or green, wherever and however you can. And so while it seemed frivolous sometimes or foolish to those who were taking care of the NGO workers or the UN workers who were there, I think it was all about mental health and wellness. And like I said, we understand that more now.
Absolutely. So tell us how and where you were when you met your late husband, Peter Caff, in Afghanistan.
Sure. So Pete that was the third time I was there. So the first time I went and had no one, just my friend and her boyfriend got me from the airport. The second time I went in, I was greeted by the same woman and two Afghan drivers who were taking care of us. And they were just civilians, but they were lovely humans who knew the city quite well and had worked in that environment for a long time. And then the third time I walked in, I got off the plane, and it was like the most bizarre experience. Someone took my bags. I felt like they lifted me off the ground. They put me into an up-armored vehicle. That was itineraries and everything was organized. And I was like, what is happening? When I got out of the car, people carried my bags for me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can carry my own bag. The first thing I did when I got there the third time, was get a security brief, which makes sense to veterans. The first time I got there, I got in a car. We drove ourselves back to a house. They unlocked the door and I went and had, some lunch. That was it. Like, first time in a war zone, no security brief, no hey, this is what's going on. These are the safe places. This is the risk assessment. None of that. So the third time was like a whole new world for me, and that's actually pretty common for NGO workers who just go in and do the work of reconstructing and community development. But obviously there's big companies that do really great work and get funding from our governments and all of that. And they provide that support so that we can go out and do our work better in a safe way. And I met Pete in that security brief, and he walked by me, said hello. And I think Sorry, I always go back to it and I have to pause because I can still see his face and his short shorts. And he was just had this beautiful energy about him, and took care of us. Like he was so I met him then. My room was right next to his the first couple of weeks I was in Afghanistan. And I'd see him at breakfast and dinner and anytime I needed to travel. And we just became friends, even though he was surly and I agreed with very little he said. I always like having people in my life who are not like me, who are challenge what I think and how I am in the world.
Well, they do say opposites attract. So was Pete over there? Was he like in the Second Commandos at that stage, or was he in the military at that stage?
So the listeners can't hear me shake my head. No. He was a security contractor. He was in and out of the army in Australia. He was in Cambodia and East Timor. He was in 3 RAR. Then he was in 4 RAR, which became 2 Commando later on. And he was in there from 1999 to 2005 when he went to Iraq for a couple of years, and then he went to Afghanistan from there. And so he was a security contractor in Afghanistan when I met him, and was the ops manager. So he took care of all the movements of all of, several dozen international staff running around all over Afghanistan.
And then, so you met Pete in 2008, and then you got together, and then in 2011 you were married and you moved to Australia. How did this all come about?
So I tell the story sometimes. We were sitting at dinner one night, and he was sitting across from a friend of mine who he was dating, and I remember we were joking and laughing around, and we were all really close friends. And I touched his leg, and my hand felt like it was on fire. And he said, like, never do that again. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cross any boundaries. Like, I'm really sorry. He's like, okay, thanks. And I went, oh, okay, that was interesting. And after dinner, Allison broke up with him.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay.
And the next day he's like, what did I do? What happened? So I see her and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, yeah, I'm not getting involved in whatever is going on there. Like, I don't like him enough to actually get in between that. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, obviously there's something between you guys. And I was like, oh, right. And then a few weeks later, I'm in the gym and he was training a number of people, me included. And we were doing some kickboxing. And one of my very good friends who was working on another project happened to be in the gym at the time. And I saw her later on and she's like, oh my God, you guys are just so cute together. And I was like, but we're not together. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. You're adorable. And I was like, oh, no idea what you're talking about. And again, it was like the penny was dropping at the time and it took a long time. Sometimes I'm thick. Once I get it, but sometimes it takes me a while to get it. But yeah, it was this just everyone else seeing it before we did. And then we got together and I was madly in love with him. He was very easy to love.
Yeah, right. And then you made the move to Australia. Yep. And were you back? So at that stage, were you still coming like from the US, and how did you make the move to, like, that's a big commitment to go, I'm going to leave my family behind in the US.
You do realize I lived in Afghanistan for 3 years, right? Like, and yes. So not so hard for me, other people, but I remember we were so we would come in and out of Afghanistan, out of Australia or the US when we were in Afghanistan and do our, they call them R&R, so your holidays. Yep. which you're required to take on those projects because it's so stressful. So came back to Australia in 2010, 10. And we put our house on the market in Victoria, Porpunka, Victoria. Super cute little town, 914 people. I think I made it 915. Right near Mount Buffalo, Bright, an hour from the snowfields in Hotham, just gorgeous part. Reminds me of upstate New York. And we put our house on the market. We went into town to get coffees because we were driving back to Sydney. And the woman at the counter knew who we were. And she was like, "Oh, where are you headed?" I said, "Oh, we've just put our house on the market." "Oh, where are you moving?" I said, "Oh, we're moving to Washington, D.C." And she was like, "Oh, wow, that's a big move." And she was like, "How do you feel about that?" I'm like, "Oh, if it doesn't work out, we'll just move somewhere else." And she goes, "I have lived here my whole life. I cannot fathom that mentality of just, if we don't like it, we'll move again. We'll make a new choice." And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's us." And it was a really great realization to me and Pete to go, that's just, we roll with it. We go, if it doesn't work there, we do something else. If it doesn't work here, we do something else. And if it does, then, you stay and you invest and you make wherever you are the best you can and home. Yeah. So that the next day we met Nick Hill that day we met Nick Hill in the city and bought my engagement ring with Nick. And then we got him, he invited us out to the unit. The next day we went, and the commanding officer told Pete he wanted him to come back and consider coming back to 2 Commando. So the very next morning we flew out, went to the States. He played rugby there. He looked for a job for a little while, and decided he wanted to come back and re-enlist. So we got married, and then he came home. So it was sort of, well, we could wait, or we could do this, or we could do that. And it was not, he proposed, and then 5 weeks later we got married, and people from all over the world came. It was amazing. It was so beautiful. And then I just followed him here after he came.
And so, like, that's just a, like, absolute, like, here we go. This is, let's turbocharge everything. And then the following year, you welcomed your daughter into the world, Emily. And then the following year, 2 years after that, your son Lachlan was born. How was this time for you when Pete was away on exercise and training, and how was that for you going with 2 young kids? Like, how was that?
Oh, look, it was really hard. I was the first year was probably my hardest in Australia. I didn't really have a network. I worked once a week in Canberra and once a week in Williamtown, flying in and out. So I was, Monday, fly up to Williamtown, Wednesday, fly to Canberra. And then Pete was away, and there was one point, I know exactly when Emily was born because I know we hadn't seen each other for 3 weeks before and 3 weeks after. Like, it's very clear to me. And the doctor was like, I'm like, no, I know exactly what's happened. But yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind from 2009 until Emily was born in 2012. It was massively, but it was really hard. And Pete was struggling to reintegrate. And get used to being back in Australia, being used to being back in the unit. I was struggling without being near any family, having no friends. I'm super social. And Australia is friendly, but until you know someone who knows someone and they vouch for you, which once they do that, like, the doors open, you become a part of their family. They love you forever. But until then, they're hesitant. Who are you? Where we moved. Yeah. Where we moved is it's very tribal. It's very much like Afghanistan. First, it's my family, then it's my community, then it's my state.
So how was that? Would have been a challenge for you, that, and because I've met you and I know that you're a bubbly, and you are a social person. that would have been tough for you, and especially not having a support network to turn to, and you're trying to raise your new daughter like that. I can see though from the experience of Afghanistan, it's made you a pretty tough person. Like you are pretty tough, and you would have been, yeah.
So I think when I moved from a little town in Cleveland, Ohio, where my dad had gone to the same high school I did, my grandparents lived, 5 or 6 streets away, to Florida, where I was in a massive school. There were 500 and some in my senior class, 463 of which graduated. And I went from being, frankly, the big fish in a little pond. We're 2 older brothers, so I was little Cherne. Everyone knew me. I worked really hard. I could walk around safely to a place where I didn't know anyone. Public transport sucked. I had to, at 13, find a new support system. In uni, I had to, at 17, I had to find a new support system. When I moved to Ecuador, I had to find a new support system. When I moved to Chile, when I moved to, I learned in going to all these places and doing all these things, including Afghanistan, how to take friends and people I think I might want to be friends with out to coffee. I learned how to put myself in the world where I'm making those connections and trying things on for size, even though I'm not sure about them, and sort of navigating that until I do find my people. But it was hard here. Having said that, living in New York the first year was really hard and felt very similar. So while all of that helped me understand transition, again, a really similar, families of veterans transition 12, 14 times sometimes. And when our veterans are transitioning out, we forget to lean on the experiences of what our families have done. So I think for me, it was just another transition. And again, it was turbocharged, as you say, when Pete was in Afghanistan and I had Emily, because there's a group of partners who just went it was like I was a magnet, and they just came around me and supported me, and they're still in my life. And I still call them when I'm frustrated with the world to go, I don't understand why this is or when I'm happy and we're celebrating. So, they showed up, they'd met me once, and then I went into labor, and they showed up at the hospital when they found out I was being induced. And made sure I had an iPad and made sure I had support people with me. And we're talking to I didn't even know this. We're talking to the midwives outside going, I'm here for Gwen Cherne. I know she's in the hospital. We just want to make sure she's okay and has support. And they're like, no, she's fine. She's got her mom. She's got support people. They're there. They're in the room with her. And they're like, okay. And then they came back the next day to see us and the baby. And it I just got lucky. I have some really beautiful humans in my life that we call family, that have always been there since then. And even though it has been really hard, and Pete had, there was violence in our relationship. And a lot of people, I think, struggle because I didn't share that a lot. But I hoped he would get better. And I knew that if I shared that, it would mean he wouldn't want to go, and it would disconnect us more from our community, the judgment from people or the shame he would feel from people knowing. So we didn't share it a lot because we hoped it would get better. I was working on things. I was going to therapy. I was hoping he would. But I think people wonder how good of friends they were to us when they didn't know these things. And I'm like, no, you were there, and I needed to not lose you. So thanks for being there when in ways you didn't know you were there for us, even though we weren't sharing that, which is why I think it's so important to talk about family and domestic violence and normalize the experience. Not that it's okay, but that people experience it. And then how do we wrap support around families instead of judging them?
Absolutely. It's a very good point that you touch on, that sometimes I feel, Gwen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel we try and shelter our friends and family from the pain, and it's hard. Like it is hard, but as you say, we've got to break that barrier down and be able to talk about things.
But it's yes and. Yeah. Oh, I'm spilling coffee. There's basketball behind us. Life is messy. I think that's the perfect. I literally spilled my coffee and there's basketball behind us. Life is messy. And I think we're so quick to judge because we want to protect the people we love.
Absolutely.
And, when we're all going to get a lot wrong.
No one's perfect.
Oh, not at all. I mean,
no one's perfect.
I've got to list the size of the M1 of all the things I've done wrong. And you can either judge people around it, and it's always going to affect hearing things, knowing things, understanding things about people, what they've done wrong, is always going to go, oh, are they a good person? And recalibrate them in your head. But if we're judging people who are sharing, like, it comes from a place of protection. So it's not just you not wanting to share because you're trying to protect other people, but their judgment comes from a place of wanting to protect you. And so we are actually protecting ourselves from being further rejected when we don't share those things. And it's not until we can just let that go and not worry about it that the people we need around us come around us, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But that doesn't always happen for families who are going through violence. They get rejected by people they need. Because those people want to protect them and don't understand why they're staying and don't understand why, this behavior is acceptable to them and why they're in this cycle, quite literally a cycle of violence that is a loop that you cannot break free of. And so it's both. It's us trying to protect the people we love by not sharing, and it's us needing those people and them to not judge us when we tell them. But having been on the other side of families who are going through this, there are people that you have to draw boundaries with because they're not getting healthy. They're not doing the work, or they're not ready to leave.
And I can say this from an outsider that I've had family members that have gone through it, and I'm just like, just leave, just get out. And I've judged going, and it's not easy. And sometimes you're like, no, and I know my family members, no, they'll come good. And finally, that family member made the decision to get out, and it was, like you're saying, I put the judgment on too quick, and it was putting it on too quick to go, oh, no, it's easy to walk away, and sometimes it's not.
It takes 10 times at least for a lot of people who are experiencing violence to leave. 10 times of leaving and then going back and leaving and then going back in small ways and big ways to actually break that cycle and leave. And when you love the person, even though they're violent or even though they're mean, even though they're, they're coercive and controlling, you still love them. So you see the good and it pulls you back in. But it's also, how do we break that down? How do we make it so we can talk about it and actually allow people who are coercive and controlling, who are perpetrating violence, get help?
Absolutely.
How do we support them to say, stop with the shame, stop with worrying about it, stop hiding it, stop doing it. Let's break this for you. Yeah. Because obviously, if you're doing that, you're suffering too.
Absolutely. I'm sitting across from you, and I'm agreeing 100% that it is that, and sometimes, and you and I have spoken about this off air as well, that some people feel it's a sign of weakness to go and seek help and ask for help, and it's not. It's a what I've learned through my struggles is that it's a sign of strength when you actually go to seek the help, and it's, you know, forever trying to break the mold of it's not weak to speak. Yep. It's a strength to go, hey, I've got a problem and I need help, and you know exactly what you're saying.
I lost a couple of friends, in uni and after uni because I was mentally unwell. And they had tried, they'd all tried. One, I remember writing to her years afterward, and she wrote back to me saying, I wish like I had been in a really unhealthy relationship. And it was an eye opener losing her as a friend, that she just didn't stand by and watch that anymore. And she said, no, it wasn't about you. I was just too exhausted. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And it was painful to let you go, but it was also the reality. You know, we get empathy fatigue. So there's that side of it. And on the other side, you know, I learned from my dad how to respond to noise, how to respond when you're frustrated, how to respond when people get in your way, how to respond when children act out. And it was all explosive. Like that, you know, from the time I was born until I moved out at mostly 13, because he stayed in Cleveland when I was in Florida. But those years of watching him with me and my brothers and my mom, ingrained in my blueprint that is the way that's appropriate to be in the world. And while I didn't want to be him, every time something would happen, it reinforced that blueprint. So I brought people into my life that didn't deserve to be there, who I couldn't trust, who would be explosive and angry with me. So I kept drawing in these things to reinforce that, you know, experience of childhood of my life and that trauma, sadly. I need a second. But what I've learned as a mom is I have to fight that every day. And I left Afghanistan because my anxiety and those, I call them my fault lines, you know, where you didn't know who you could trust. My anxiety went through the roof. I didn't know who I could trust. And for me, that is a mental health fault line for me. And when you're looking at, you know, your deputy, who's an Afghan, or you're looking at the finance person, you know, or one of the engineers or the cleaner, and you're going, which one of you actually wants me dead? Which one of you actually shared my movements with the Taliban? Which one of you actually is only here to get information for nefarious reasons? I don't know. I'll never, ever know which one of you were actually dedicated to us and I could fully trust you, and which ones I couldn't. And that feels awful because I want to be a trusting person. I innately am. So to know that was going on, and there were other reasons for it, and I understood it and all of that, but it was still a fault line for me. So eventually my anxiety got that, and Pete and the stress he put on me, and that's the first time I've said that publicly, just put me over the edge, and I couldn't cope anymore. So I had post-traumatic stress when I came home, and anxiety off the charts. So it was a really hard shift in DC when I came back from Afghanistan. And then just lived that cycle with him. But I'm still fighting that cycle, and I have to do so much work. And I used to think anger was like a kettle, and it would boil and boil and boil. And eventually you've just got to let the top off. The anger's got to go somewhere, right? And I remember saying that to my therapist about 6 months ago. And she was like, why? And I said, what do you mean why? Like, the anger's got to go, like the energy has got to go somewhere. And she said, why can't it be an ice cube and just melt? And I was like, oh. So now every time, literally, I start feeling myself go from 6 to 10, I then, as soon as I'm at 10, I'm like, just melt, just melt, just melt, is what's going through my head of like, just let it melt. And even when I get snippy or rude with the kids, I'm like, I can see myself doing it. I'm like, stop being a cow. Like, it's like an out of body experience. Just shut your mouth and stop being a cow.
It's fun. And we can laugh about it, but it is so true in what you're saying, because like I'm like a firecracker too, and my mum she can attest to this. She can say and it's something that I've tried to I'm trying to get better with it, and I can tell you, Gwen, if something pisses me off, I'll snap, and people go, it's like a freight train coming at you, and I've learnt, like you, to just go sometimes, and we something will just set us off, and it's just like and then you'll go. Oh, and then afterwards, I sit there and go, oh, maybe I could have handled that a little bit better, or like you're saying, melt it down and just, sometimes yourself, and people can listen to this and go, yeah, sometimes we will snap without in our brain, where instead of just taking that second or two to go, hang on, then go. We just, and as you said, you go, kids, like,
And for me, it's almost all my children. Yeah. Like they're the ones who push those buttons. And in my life, I have found ways at work or elsewhere, I don't even feel that anymore. Yeah. And when I do, like I was after Anzac Day, probably because of the early night and the, frankly, drinking on Anzac Day. I was super grumpy on Tuesday. And I remember going, okay, and I was like, oh, why is that happening? Oh, this and that. No, I did that. No, she did that. No, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, I need to not communicate with anyone today. Because this is not going to be healthy. And to just, it meant, okay, I need to be extra patient with the kids. I know I'm grumpy, but it's that awareness of like, oh, what's happening? And okay, a little of this is from yesterday. There's something going on, and probably a little, but I think we can't just stop doing it. We actually have to, and this is where what I think I've learned in the last year in ways I didn't before. We train for all of this stuff, right? But we don't train for being pissed off and not getting road rage. Yes. Like, how do you train for that? Well, we don't even think about it. We just do, right? But I now have to meditate every morning. And when I meditate, I imagine roots literally growing out of the bottom of my feet into the ground that they are planted on and holding me there. And then I imagine like light going up through my body and centering me and calming me. Yep. And I do that every morning. So now when Lachlan is like in my face humming, and he does that sound, which is horrible. I apologize for anyone who's super sensitive. In your face for 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, Gwen. And I imagine those roots grounding me again before I respond. But it's because I'm training myself to do that every single morning, to breathe before it instead of just snapping at him. And it doesn't stop me from snapping at him and going, Lachlan, pull it in. You're acting ridiculous. I know you can all hear me saying that. But it's really that like we've got to get tools that work for us and then train to do them every single day.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's like, you can't expect to run a marathon tomorrow. Now, I know many of our veterans can do that physically. However, your body is better off when you train, right? Correct. You feel better at mile 23 after.
Correct. Yes. No, it's something that I've learned through my journey as well, and it's very similar to through my mental health and my struggles and what I've learned over the years, and I've become very connected with the universe. I feel that what you put out is what you get back, And so every night before I go to bed, I always say I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my wealth. I'm grateful for my family, my friends, the podcast, everything that I feel grateful for. I say it out to the universe, and then I go to sleep. And then what I'm teaching my subconscious mind is that I'm going to bed on a positive note. So I'm not going to bed with a negative note. I'm going to sleep with a positive note. And some people out there are going, "What the hell are you on?" But it's true. And then what I do in the morning is I do the same thing. I wake up and I say the same things. So I'm telling myself and my subconscious mind that it's going to be a great day. And what I learned through one of the veterans McQuilty Quirk, he gave this to me from a tool, because he was blown up in Afghanistan and he died 4 times on that day. He now has a saying, and I've taken it with his blessing, that the first 3 steps that you take in any single day will be the hardest 3 steps that you take. If you can take those first 3 steps, you can accomplish anything in that day or going forward in life. And I've learnt that, and it's very similar to you. Meditation makes you feel calm. With me saying my gratefulness, going to bed and waking up, I feel great, and I can attack the day. And my housemates say to me, "What drugs are you on?" And I said, "I'm on the life drug." I said, "Do you want some?" Do you want some?
So that's, I know it, like you said, it sounds airy-fairy and all of that. Like, it sounds ridiculous.
It does.
It 100%. Except there's actual science behind what you've just said. And it's powerful to do what you do. It's even more powerful if you write it down, just so you know.
Okay.
And it is. And what it does is actually rewires the brain. So we have these pathways in our brain that actually strengthen. So if you go outside and you're driving down the road and you go, "Everyone's in my way today," then you are literally strengthening the negative connections in your brain. It is scientific proof now. We have evidence to show this. If you go out and you're like, "Oh, that woman's driving a little bit slow. I wonder if she's having a bad day. Oh, there's a pee plater and she actually still doesn't know what she's doing. Oh, that man is, he's in a rush getting to work and probably had a bad morning. I'll just, I'll chill out a little bit. No one's in my way. I might be a little bit late and that's okay." And it, again, sounds ridiculous. And yet you're strengthening the positive connections in your brain. And when you do that, it literally changes the way you look at the world. And I know this because my daughter's experienced a lot of trauma. And every single thing we do, her first statement, we'll go and see a play. We went to see Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I said, "Oh, what was your favorite part?" She goes, "I don't know if I liked it." Everything's negative. "Oh, I don't like that dress on you. I don't like the way this goes on your neck, Mom." When I'm already dressed, headed out the door, and I didn't even ask for her opinion. I'm like, can't change the neckline on my dress. I'm not like an instant magician or seamstress. Thanks. It would be better if it was a higher neck. Thanks. It's not. Her brain is wired negatively because of the trauma. So people who've experienced trauma have brains that are predispositioned to go to the negative first, which means we have to work our tushes off to rewire them. It means getting a gratitude journal, a really cool one or a really pretty one, sparkles, glitter, whatever it takes. And quite literally writing down one today, date 1. I am grateful for the fact that I woke up and it wasn't raining. But it's not just those big things that you were talking about. It's if you can't find anything, what are you grateful for in this moment at this particular? I am grateful that I am breathing. I am grateful that I am not cold. I am grateful that I have a phone to connect with the world. Like, what are those little things? And then, when she's feeling really negative, she goes in her book. She's like, "You're a horrible mom." Yep. Go open your gratitude journal and read it from page 1. Oh, mom took me on a walk. Oh, mom took me kayaking. Oh, mom spent an hour with me and I forgot that. Oh, mom told me this. Like, there's all these things in there that go, oh, you're not horrible, and recalibrate her. And then she comes out, she gives me a cuddle, she tells me if she feels better, and usually has a better day the next day.
I know exactly what you're saying, because so when I had my ADD with learning difficulties, I used to get frustrated and I used to yell at mum, and and my one regret in life, and mum listens to all my podcasts. My one regret, and this is the first time I've said it. This is the first time I've said it, Gwen, is that my one regret is that I made my mum cry on numerous times, and I'd always end up doing what Emily does and come out and give a big hug, and I'd write notes and I'd say I'm sorry, and mum's kept every note, and it's when you just said that, it's interesting because I've been there. I know what it's like. It's like, I hate you, and hate's a very strong word, and I, they're trying to grow up too. They're trying to find their way in the world, and this is me looking now, going, like I've got to a good age of 30 where things start to make, I can look at things, and I know that they say you shouldn't have regret, but that's the one regret that I'm really regretful and seeing your mum cry and making her cry because of something you've said. I look at that now and I go, you overstepped the mark. That's overstepping. I am sorry that I made you cry. And I do see it that when I was negative, when I had a negative approach on life and a negative outlook, it was, I can see exactly what you're saying, that now I'm forever, I'm so grateful for my parents because they gave me an education. They gave me a chance in life. And without an education, you've got no future. And I really believe that, like, my parents, money was not they found, money was tight, and they found a way to get me to get the extra help. And I know some people, and I'm writing my book at the moment, and some people that I went to school with where their parents didn't care, they're in jail. And I could have gone down that path as well without without them caring, but I'm forever grateful for my parents because they gave me a chance in life. And I now see, like you said, I only see the positive side of life. I don't see the negative side. And you're the same. You now see,
Oh, I see the negative. There's something I want to say there though. Like, as a parent, it's our job to stay rock solid for you and be that rock to, bump up against when you need to hate the world, when you need to be frustrated. There are abusive children, don't get me wrong, and that's not acceptable, but we all need somewhere to just let those emotions be okay and come out. And I have a friend who says if my children say that they hate me, I know I'm doing a good job as a mom. I'm doing something right, obviously, but they're supposed to at some point, and that within appropriate levels, that pushing against them, that we're, my kids definitely have made me cry. And I certainly made my parents cry. In my 20s, not as a little kid, though. It was much worse, I think. But it's that, knowing that unconditional love, even when you do that, is there. We're really lucky to have had that.
Yeah, absolutely. And going, like, I can see with you, and going back to Anzac Day when you said, I can see, because it's a very emotional day for you. There's a reason, and we'll get into that reason in a minute. I can see why you were like, the next day you're feeling off, because it's a very emotional day, and it brings up for not just you, also everyone, and also the kids and everyone. But yeah, so let's actually talk about that now. Let's talk about, we go forward to 2016, and Pete had a stroke. Let's talk about what changed in Pete and what you noticed and also the family noticed.
I think that's I think people want to know that Pete changed after his stroke. But he really didn't. I think everything just became a little bit harder for him. It amplified his experience of pain, trauma, depression, paranoia, anxiety. All of that was just slightly amplified after, and being in an environment where he was surrounded by high performing individuals, his insecurities were heightened. And it was, oh, I can't compete. Whereas before it would have been like, nah, I'm Teflon. I can do this. I don't care what those young blokes think. I'm 48 and, still bulletproof, even though he lost mates and knew that he wasn't. He overcame that. Whereas I think once he had the stroke, that fear of having a stroke and having his body fail him, which I think I probably sometimes underestimate when I talk about his experience. And then going, and I'm going to lose being in the military, which is, he was out twice. He knew what civilian life was and wasn't like. And he knew that he absolutely loved being a soldier. So that was something that he didn't get anything from life. He didn't get as much from life as he did there. So knowing what was potentially coming, even though just for those listeners who don't know our story, he thought he was going to be medically discharged and the Army was telling him everything to the contrary. They were putting him on promotions courses. They just wanted to give him another 6 months to heal and let his brain come round and all that. He just didn't believe them, didn't trust them. And I think, again, that real anxiety and insecurity was just amplified.
So, Gwen, you talk about Pete after the stroke and what help was available for him and what help did the military provide?
Look, they tried to just let him heal. They tried to just give him space. They tried to be supportive. They put him in a support unit that wasn't in one of the companies, but allowed him to go to work, allowed him to do one of the things that actually helps him heal, which is play golf. In the afternoons when he wasn't working, wasn't anything, and he could knock off early. He was playing golf 3 times a week, which for him was a great break. He was out in nature. He was doing sport. He was walking, because he does 18 holes. He was walking. He was seeing his friends. He was doing some stuff that was really important for his brain, but it wasn't fast enough for him. And I do believe that his command thought they were giving him all the support he needed. And that what he was telling them was, yep, sounds good, thank you. And what he was telling me was like, this is ridiculous and I want to be this. And I was like, oh, God, help me. But I didn't get to be included in the conversation. I didn't know about his medical appointments. It was hard to understand his medications. It was hard to understand what their plan was. So I couldn't provide him with a decent sounding board to go, actually, that's not what they said. They said this. Actually, this is, I do trust your RSM. I do think that's what they want. And if it's not, let's talk about other options, love. Let's go and sit at a transition seminar. I didn't know that those were things we could do. So to answer your question, not enough.
And we're going to talk now, if it's all right with you. Share with us the 6th of February 2017. Where were you when you received the terrible news?
So I might step back just briefly. Yeah. P was really deteriorating in this time and getting more and more reclusive. Any noise in the house was unacceptable. Mind you, I had a 2-year-old at the time and a 4-year-old and a 17-year-old. So it was, getting in, or 18 at that time, 17 to 18, he turned 18. I digress. He became more and more anxious. He became more and more volatile, is probably the word, and needing just nothing, no external input, essentially, and was just really struggling and wouldn't get help. And then all of a sudden, we'd had an argument in early Jan, and I said, if you want a divorce, I gave him an ultimatum. If you want a divorce, I will give you one. Otherwise, you are an invested, loving, caring husband and father, full stop. Like, you've got to be here. You've got to be present. Otherwise, I will accept whatever it is that's going on with you. I will support you in the fact that you say you want a divorce and that you have to go and do the work to do that. But okay. And I hadn't seen him that invested in our family in a long time. So January was a beautiful month, even though he was really struggling. The week before he died, he was doing his bio and couldn't take any noise in the house when he was working on his computer. And he just went off at the kids. And he'd gone off at me, would go off on Tom, but Emily was his princess and Lachlan was an angel. And so he was really, really patient with them, much more so than I. And when I saw him lose it, I was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. They're getting too old. They're like, this just isn't okay behavior. And it deteriorated from there. Essentially, I had to leave. He was violent. I had to leave and go to a friend's and was there with her. And then he played golf on the Sunday with his friends. And on Monday morning, I found out that he had died by suicide. And sadly, I was in a supermarket. Defense didn't know that until recently. And they thought that I went to that friend's house where I was staying. And they came to the house and told me, but I had known because a neighbor had called me and told me. And yeah, it was just, my world broke. So, a lot of people in the veteran space don't like to say we're broken, but like the world cracked in half for me that day.
As it would, like you know the work that Pete did, and when he was away on deployments, and did you prepare that something could happen whilst being deployed, but then being at home, you couldn't prepare yourself for the news of that Pete had taken his own life?
So two things. One is, as a defense wife, I always had a black dress in my closet. I was emotionally prepared for bad news, if not horrific news, when he was away. Even on training, like when he would be jumping out of a plane, I would, almost hold my breath until he called me that night. There are days when they go into a pool, they flip a helicopter over and they all have to get out. And I'm worried that they might drown. And, they're always at risk. So you're always going, okay, you have to be prepared for bad news. But several years before, when Emily was a year old, I was with a colonel and we were on a walk with a number of us at a conference. We walked up Mount Macedon and he died. And the first thing the thing that hit me so profoundly being with him when he died was he was at a conference. He'd just come home from Afghanistan and his wife was so ill prepared for that news. So that had always made me, you just never know. He was, again, fit, healthy, young, and that was just the furthest thing from her mind that could happen to him while he was away, considering where he'd been and what he'd come home from. So, to be caught totally off guard. And with Pete, I always knew it was a possibility. Like, we knew he had mental health struggles. We knew that was something he fought his demons every single day. So it wasn't an it wasn't, when they told me, it's not like I didn't believe them or it was a surprise, but my world still was broken.
It is like you would like that's the person you loved the most, and to have them there 1 minute and the next minute gone. I can see why your world was shattered. It's shattering. Like that's and like you said, being prepared the best you could when Pete was away on deployment or he was training but yeah, like you don't. It's like for you, and I'm trying to find the words. It was a shock, but not a shock. If I can, if tell me if
Yeah, look, really, and when you ask Tom, he's like, "No, that's how I thought my dad would die." Like it's super hard to hear. The reality is that Pete was a very tormented human. His mind just did not allow him to see, one, the impact he had on the world or people, or two, what he'd accomplished. Like watching him go through his birthday every year was one of the most painful experiences of being a wife, because it was this review of where he was and what he'd accomplished and what he hadn't accomplished and who he was and how much money he had in the bank and what he owned and what he didn't. It was like a stock take where he was the loser every time. And I was like, could we flip that on its head?
Look at what you have achieved.
Like, you have 4 beautiful children who could not adore you more. Yeah. They worship the ground you walk on. They would follow you anywhere, do anything for you. It was so sad to me that he could never see any of that. And he felt so alone, even though he just wasn't.
And you know it too. You've gone through depression. I've gone through it. And I'm almost crying when I'm talking to you about it. You can see that, like, people say it, and I can see it now with the work that I've done, and you can as well with the work you've done as well. You're in such a dark hole that you can only see negative. You can't see positive. And saying, can you flip that and say, hey,
they can't.
Yeah, they can't.
And I think the thing that's really important for me to communicate to our community right now is, when you feel like you're in that dark hole and that pain is so big, you just want it to end. The one takeaway I need people to have is, you take all of your pain, all of that trauma and suffering, every inch of that darkness, and you hand it to your mom, your dad, your siblings, your children, your partner, your mates who love you even though you think they're a bunch of jerks and they don't care about you and they didn't call you on Anzac Day, or they didn't call you when the last important thing happened in your life. Like, it doesn't matter. You hand every bit of it, you hand all of that to each one of them on their own. So it's not going away. You're not taking that pain away from the world. You're not making anything easier. You're actually amplifying it for all the people whose lives you have touched.
Correct. And it's such a message, Gwen, that I didn't see it until I attempted myself. And I look at it now, and I said it in a podcast with a friend of mine, that so my parents are in their 70s and 60s, and sorry, mum and dad, to say your age, but if they live for another 40 years, that's 40 years of pain and suffering that I've inflicted on their lives. What life does that give them for the rest of their life? And I see it now. I do see it. And I'm such an advocate of mental health, because now I can see how much pain, and people have said to me, Adam, the work you're doing is amazing, like you're an inspiration. And it's like I don't see myself as an inspiration. I just see someone who's got a message to share, that if I can help just one person and maybe change their negative outlook on life to a positive outlook, then that's the message.
It's not even it can be even smaller than that. I think it's realizing that each one of us impacts at least one human.
Correct.
And when you're in that space, because I was there in my 20s, there was one human who will be disappointed or sad. If you can think one single human being will be slightly affected if I go. And maybe people want that. Maybe they don't feel affected, and so they want that. Actually, you're taking all of, like I said, all of that pain and handing it to them. It's that understanding that I think we miss when we're there, that we actually impact people, that we actually affect them. If someone's angry at you, it's because they love you or care about you or need you or want you to be something you're not, or give them something that you're not giving them. Again, that is children coming in and out.
That's
Sorry.
fine. That's fine. No, it's all good. It's all good.
You are impacting someone's life. And if you're impacting anyone's life at all, even through disappointment, because of your perceived failures, your perception of your own failures, that human will be suffering even more than you are right now.
And I think it's something you just touched on then. So many people are scared of their failures. I
fail several times every day. I love failing.
But I agree with you, because you learn from like some of our greatest lessons come through our
hope.
Yeah, and well, yes, you hope. Yeah.
Sometimes we just keep failing. There's this great it's a little animation, and it's about you're walking down the path and you fall into the hole, and you're walking down the path, and every time you walk down that path you fall into the same hole, and then all of a sudden one day you go, oh my God, there's a hole, but you're already in it. And then you anticipate it a little bit before then, so you can fail, but then slowly, by understanding why we fail, and looking at it and thinking about it and analyzing it, and then you can start to go, oh no, I'm gonna stop. I'm still in the hole. And then one day you'll actually go around the hole. Yeah. Maybe you just hover above it.
No, that's true. It's true. It is true in that, and so many people just go, no, I can't fail. And you kind of need to fail at certain things, because that's where you grow as a person. You grow as a human being.
But I also think it's flipping it. It's going, is it a failure that I didn't put a post up about remembrance, which is something I really support, and the fact that we put teddy bears all over cenotaphs this year to commemorate families and think about families and bring some visibility to that. I put my teddy bear up there on the cenotaph, but I didn't post about it. It's silly. It sounds so silly. Hi, puppy dog. Is that a failure, or is that just, no, what was important was me putting it there. Yeah. Yes, I need to spread the word, is it a failure that I didn't reach out to someone, or I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or is it just, that's life, and we can only do what we can do.
There's only one of us. There's not 50 of us. There's one of us, and you're right, exactly right in what you say. It's one of us. Does it really matter that, hey, I didn't put a photo up?
I think it's the idea that we're constantly not enough. Our standards are so high. Our expectations of each other and those around us, and what the world gives us and what the world does for us. And, is my friend there? Is she not? Is the government doing this for me? Is it not? We have to recalibrate that a little. The government needs to be doing certain things. The, Department of Veterans Affairs needs to be providing good, well flexible support for our veterans. We need more mental health workers for our youth. The amount of things that need to be happening that aren't is astronomical, and we all need to keep working for that. But there's also where we need to go, okay, what is it that I need to do for me? And that is the one thing I say to Pete every morning when I wake up, because I still believe he's standing to my left. He's right on my shoulder, is you didn't do you. You didn't take responsibility for you. You constantly wanted other people to help you, to support you, to do more for you. You didn't stand in yourself enough and go, this is me. This is what I need to do for me. I am responsible for me. And so what does that mean for everyone? No. Ultimately, you are responsible for you. You are responsible for the way you wake up every morning. Your parents can help you. They can support you. They can love you. They cannot do it for you.
No, that's right. And
you can have all the help in the world and not do any of it.
That's right. And it's something I said to you, that you've got to fight. You've got to, when you're in the dark hole, you've got to have that inner fight to fight back and go, I'm not going to accept this. I'm going to fight back. And I'm with you, how you just said Pete was on your shoulder. I believe I'm like you, my nan. I was very close to my late nan. And I've told this to you before, that she's with me every single day. I know she's my guardian angel. She's with me every single day. And I try to make her proud of the young man that I've become. And I hope I have, in the values she instilled in me at a very young age, is respect for one another, and just respect and treat people the way you want to be treated. So when you just said to me, Pete's on my shoulder, my nan's on my shoulder, and Mum said, I just wish I could feel that like you feel. And I know she's with me every single day, and I know she's still there with a bit of guidance and guiding me. So yeah, it does, absolutely. So I 100% agree in what you're saying with, we have to be the ones that live in our own shoes, and we're in control of our own destiny. We're in control of our own life through our own life choices. It is up to us. It's up to no one else. It's up to us.
And the support needs to be there. Don't get me wrong, 100%. And when you put your hand up to say, I need help, if the support isn't there that you need, we can't fail you. But we have to at least be willing to go, okay, if the support is imperfect, how do I find something else? It's also, I have done an enormous amount of work in the last several weeks, hopefully in a way that has healed me a bit more than I've been in the past 5 years, for sure. To think about my own expectations and the boundaries I have and the belief in myself. And for me, it's no longer a fight. For me, that fight is over. For me, now it's simply, and I know this sounds ridiculous to a lot of you, it's self-love. It is literally giving myself a cuddle in the morning, or when I feel like, I'm not enough, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, and going, it's okay, you are. And the more I can love myself and be okay with my imperfections and who I actually am, the more I do, the happier I am. It's the weirdest thing. The more I'm okay with my failures, the less shame I have about who I actually am, and the crappy mom I can be, and the crappy friend I can be, and the, disappointment that, the more okay with that I am, the more energy I have, the happier I am, the more I do. So it's quite counterintuitive.
I class you as a friend now. I really do. I've met you, and I class you as a friend. And it is like when you sit there, and when you can take control and not let the noise, the outside noise, and you're 100% correct in what you just said, where you're comfortable in your own skin, that's where
I'm not there yet.
you're working towards it. You're working towards it.
I'm going to be working toward that until I'm like in my late 90s.
But it's you are comfortable. You are starting to get more comfortable of who you are, who Gwen is, with all the failures, with everything. You'll come, and that's a true power to you, and that's me taking my hat off to you, because it is. It's hard work, and what you've done.
It's hard to look in the mirror and go, you screwed that up, and I love you anyway.
It sounds so simple, and it's like with my psychologist said the same thing. Look in the mirror and say, I love you. And
It sounds, I can't do it yet.
It's hard. I can now. I can. And I'm not, no. See, people go, oh, that's just arrogant. No, it's confidence. I now am comfortable.
Compassion.
It is. It's allowing yourself to go, actually, you know what? You're a great guy.
Yeah.
You are. You've got some really good values. And yes, I do love you. And it is hard to sit there and go, talk into a mirror and go, I love you. Yeah. I love who you are. You're a great guy.
You're awesome. Yeah. You shine, little star. You shine.
Yes. And it is. You sit there and go, and some people who walk past go, oh, geez, look at what is happening there. But it's a lot of hard work. But how hard was it for you going forward, and how did you find the courage, and where did you find your inspiration going forward after Pete's death?
It was more of a fire in my belly mission. Tom, Emily, Lucky, like Tom's 23 and in the Army, and he is 2 to 3 times more likely to consider, attempt, and die by suicide. So we know how it ended for his dad. If he's 2 times more likely than his dad to do all those things, then I have a big job on my hands. That is as a mom every day for him. That is connecting with his biological mom, who's awesome, who loves him to bits, and make sure we have a good, solid relationship. So we're supportive of him, and he knows he's got 3 living parents, his stepdad, his stepmom, and his mom, who are rock solid together, supporting him, loving him, no matter what journey he takes in this world. And then to make sure when he puts his hand up, that system is rock solid. And I won't stop until then. People ask me, aren't you tired? Can't you take a break? Don't you think you've done enough? Isn't it taking a toll? Yeah, hell yeah. But it's not rock solid yet. I cannot trust that if I know my work does not start and stop with me anymore. It just doesn't. People are working so hard. We've got a Royal Commission. We've got creative people within Open Arms. We've got DVA, Defense working together to, ESOs, little ones, big ones, old ones, new ones, individuals, like people are coming together. We've got a mental health commission. We've got things like Gotcha for Life working on mental health in our schools and our communities, blah, 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 trying to help tackle suicide prevention. But it's not, we haven't got it yet. Like the numbers aren't going down yet. And until I can trust that our kids, the kids and the family members of all these people who suicided, and these numbers are massive now. Like every day, they're massive. Yeah. So until that, we start understanding and connecting and valuing ourselves more, my work isn't done. And that's going to continue to drive me. Be it in this position, specifically with veterans or somewhere else, like that is just something I'm never, knowing what it feels like to be in that hole. And then knowing what it feels like after I was a witness at the Royal Commission to be in that hole again, where I wasn't afraid of it, where it wasn't, it was hell, but where I let it wash over me, where I didn't judge myself, where I didn't feel shame. And then the healing I got to do in that, where that was shifted for me, which I haven't been this healthy or this comfortable or this loving of myself in 5 years.
And it's it's a credit to you for the work that you have done, and most people would, after what's happened with the trauma and everything, go very reserved, go into a shell. You haven't done that. You've got on the front foot, and you have been an advocate for change. What is it that drives you, apart from the kids? What is it that drives you to want to make change for veterans and also mental health?
There's an easier way of being in the world. And every time I speak or do something, or people go, oh my goodness, that's my experience. I feel like you were me. I feel like you understand me. Or there's recently a dad who lost his son to suicide. He's a civilian. And he said the anniversary came up and he was super angry. And my friend is his daughter. And she said to him, after, she's awesome, but she said to him, so be angry. And he's like, I don't want to tell anyone. She goes, tell everyone. Tell everyone how angry and pissed off you are, Dad, so they know it's okay. So he started to. And all these people were like, yeah, I am too. Oh, I can't believe he left us. This is ridiculous. And it freed him from that. I call them mental, we have little jails in our heads where we, won't share with the world because we're protecting them, we're protecting us. And actually it's a self-induced jail cell. But when we communicate that, then it opens up and creates human connection and love. One of the interesting things I read, just quickly, sorry, I know I've been talking forever.
No, it's fine. It's a topic that I'm happy to talk about because it's so close to my heart. So
there's this description of mateship in Australia. I saw it right before Anzac Day. And it was connection and brotherhood and support through adversity. The description and the definition of mateship was forged through adversity in Australia. This is a country built on mateship through suffering and trauma. That is this nation in a nutshell. And it isn't truer than in the last 2.5 years. Droughts, fires, which you know all too well, massive, historical floods. We have experienced COVID, all of this adversity. And so, the one thing that connects all of us, and I've said this a number of times, is suffering. It isn't love. Not everyone in this world is lucky to feel love, but we all feel suffering. One small degree, slight degree, doesn't matter if it's a, hangnail or massive, massive trauma. Yep. We all know what suffering feels like. So that is the thing that connects us. And what can come from that is love. What can come from that is beauty and healing. So let's try to do that by stop judging the suffering and the failures and go, actually, that's what connects me because that guy's failed, that girl's failed. And love each other through it instead of judging and hating on one another, which is not helping any of us.
No, that's right. So the work you do as the Veteran Family Advocate Commissioner.
I know it's a mouthful.
So what programs are in place to help families and veterans going forward into the future?
Look, there's quite a bit. One of the things that I work on all the time is trying to figure out what the legislation should actually allow organizations like DVA to do for families. So what is there in the civilian space and what is there in the ESO space, ex-service organization space, and what is it that DVA should be legally funded through government to do for families. We have been stretching that boundary and we have been, pushing on that that line of, the legislation allows DVA to do X. Well, let's push that. Well, now we need to go, okay, what does need to be funded? what do families need? And I know what a lot of that stuff is, but what does it need to say so we can fund it? What does it need to, what does government need to actually put that tick off to say, okay, this is what we think the Australian people owe or should do for veteran families because of the trauma and expectation and requirements that come to you as a defense veteran family, which are unique.
Absolutely.
You are not in charge of where you live or if you can work, a shift work because your partner might be away and might not be, and you won't find out till the day before. The restrictions and changes in your life are at the whim of our government. Unlike most other positions. Yes, they might be at the whim of your employer, but it's easier to get out of a bank or something else. Police have very similar lives in some ways, but they're not consistently picking up their families and moving them across the nation and into other countries at the, beck and call.
Correct. No, I 100% agree. It's same as fireys. Like, once you select your state, unless you want to change and move and, or like police get a posting and then they might take that might be their one station for life or however long they're in the police. You're right. It's unique in the sense of defence that you are, you've got a posting for 3 years, then you could put in the same posting, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get it again. So it's 100%.
And yet that insecurity of, being on call and things like that, you would totally understand. So while there are similarities, I think the family experience is amplified for families, that especially families who are struggling or introverts or going through family and domestic violence, they're consistently doubly isolated. Yeah. You start to make those connections in that support group for 2 years in one community, and then you're picked up and moved and have nothing again, and yet it starts all over. And that's really, something that we need as a nation to keep tackling. So what are those supports? Well, there's supports now within DVA. They're working on the transition out and what that looks like in support for families there. You have DMFS, Defense and Member Family Services, which do mostly referrals and yet have other programs for support for families. Then you have Defense Families Australia, which is has grown and expanded and pushed so hard in the last year or so with Sandy, Luxon, and Sharon in there, just making it what it actually needs to be for families in terms of advocacy and advice to defense and in showing them what families' needs are and getting that support wrapped around them. You've got my position put in place to advise government. I'm not a caseworker. I'm not a social worker, but I have them. So anyone who needs support contacts me. I'm a soft entry point to DVA to say, are you getting everything you need, or are there things you don't know about? And we have people who can help you navigate that system. So don't hesitate. Email me.
So when you took on the role, did you know before you took this role on, did you know any of this existed, or have you learnt in the role what's out there and available?
So I knew about Defence Families Australia because I was upset about our housing, and they actually helped me advocate, which now has changed some of the, it's taken a decade, but the families in Sydney are finally able to move around and live where they want to live, because in Sydney they often there are some towns in Australia where our defence members will stay, but that is not the experience of the vast majority of our defence families. There's also, so you want that freedom to live wherever you want. Yeah. If you want to live on the Northern Beaches or in the Shire or in Liverpool, defense shouldn't say that if you might be here for 10 years. Mm-hmm. I want to live where my family is. I want to live where I have support. Yeah. I want to live near my job. I want to, you should be able to have some freedom within a very controlling environment where we can get it. We want it. And then there's, did I know about it? I knew about that. I knew about DMFS, but never connected with them. I would get packets occasionally of information. didn't go to much. Used a social worker once, and wasn't ready to leave, but she was lovely and supportive, and I knew I could call her potentially, which I never felt I had the ability to do because I was afraid they would tell the command, and that would make my life worse. So that I knew existed. I knew of Legacy, but I didn't understand what they did or who they were. And no, I didn't know about the War Widows. I didn't know about any of the other ESOs. I didn't know if there was any support from RSL for families, that sort of stuff. No.
Yeah, right. So it's been something that you've had to learn along the road and along the journey. And you mentioned that the recent Royal Commission. What do you hope are the outcomes, and what can we, moving forward, how do we make the system better?
Look, I hope the year extension will provide them with some time to put together some really good recommendations, and to allow families to have their voices heard because they need to. But I also hope that any government that is in power when those recommendations come out takes them on the word ravenous comes to mind. Like just with an effort that we haven't seen before in terms of, trying to provide the supports and services that are required, or changes in our systems that are required to help reduce and provide more support for people.
Like you said to me, and I've spoken to many veterans, and you've spoken to many veterans as well. A lot of them say to me, and when they, especially ones that are there for life, and I feel that when, like the Royal Commission, and also if there's steps in place to help veterans transition, that most veterans say to me that, especially ones that are medically discharged, it was never in their radar to be that they were there for life. They saw themselves, and they're the soldier, or they're, in the Air Force, or they never saw their life outside of defence. And they almost every single veteran I ever speak to says, when we leave defence, we feel that we've lost our sense of purpose. The identity of who we are is, we've lost it. And I feel that through the Royal Commission and through the work you're doing, that we can bridge that gap and make them transition better from defence to civilian life.
I agree. I think we still have a lot of work to do. I do find it interesting how much confidence they lose when they transition out of the uniform. I know they lose their networks, they lose their support system. A lot of times they lose friends. But it's the confidence that just throws me. Like, I know you've lost your identity, yes, and I know that has a lot to do with your confidence level. But what have you accomplished? All these things that you have done and you have been trained to do that you never in a million years as a kid thought you could do. All the places you've traveled, I think about Kapuka, and one of the very first things that they have to do when they're learning how to hold and use a weapon. And I'm like, I'm not going to run up to something and do that. And yet they learn how to do it. They're trained to do it. Their brains work, why do you forget that you are an amazing human that can do anything? I still have a hard time wrapping my head around that. Every veteran I know has been a vibrant, beautiful human who has accomplished so much, even just joining and taking that leap. Like, why, when you leave and become a civilian again, you grew up a civilian, even if you were a defense kid, Well, I know that a lot of them went in at 17, but it's why I say to them when they're in, you need to do things like go out and get your Medicare card while you're in, even though you'll never use it. Have it. It's, go and I may, like for Tom, every single time he's done something, I'll help him find the phone numbers for car insurance. And then if he gets feisty and wants me to do something for him, which he does less and less, I'll like dial a phone number and hand him the phone and walk away. And he's like, and then he figures it out. But you have to not, one of the things I think is funny is like people, and I don't want to trivialize it, but it's after Pete died, I couldn't make a decision to save my life. And I totally lost confidence in that. And my therapist said to me, go to the shop. And I was like, okay. She goes, pick a cereal. Step one. You don't know which one to pick. Pick one. Doesn't matter. There are no consequences to picking the wrong cereal. Then go to the shop. Get a t-shirt. Pick the red one or the blue one. Pick one. And then build your confidence slowly. You want a friend? Ask the woman next to you on the mat next to you at yoga. She wants to go out for a coffee. Maybe she says she's too busy. Ask the one on your right. Start by making decisions that don't have any consequences and reminding people, again, build your skills. Start small. You don't want to go outside. Go on a 5-minute walk. Like I'm learning how to run again because I have a foot injury. So I'm having to run for a minute, walk for a minute. Again, everything we do in life is a learned skill. Correct. You want to know how I stand on a stage and talk to, 600 people or 7,000 people or 20 people or my children's school, which was the most intimidating thing I did. Practice, training, all of it. Like, you want to know how you be a civilian? Practice.
That's right. You're a civilian before you're a soldier. Yep. You transition. That's one part of your life, and I actually had this conversation with Harry Moffat, and he said to me, he goes into the units now, and he's all about, right, what is your transition out of defence? What are you going on to? This soldier is one part of who you are. You might get injured, and that's the end of in 2 years or 10 years, whatever. You can't see it as defence is your lifelong, I'm going to retire in defence. You've got it from day one. What is your next step? What are you going on to do?
I look at defence as like my uni experience and my master's degree experience. Like I could have been an academic my whole life, but I chose to transition out of academia into the real world. It was terrifying to go and be a development worker, overseas and be like, oh my God, this is what I'm going to do. But, the skills and the things you learn in defense are skills and things you need for the rest of your life. Correct. So if you look at your transition as almost a graduation from a portion of your life into something else. That's right. And then you're going, okay, look, I've done this. What is next? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? Yeah. And that is scary. I get it. 100%. But go. Life is short. Go live it. Do something fun. Do something you never, wanted to have a podcast like Adam, actually, you guys accomplish so many things. You're such high performing individuals. And those of you who are out there that are medically transitioning right now or going to or might in the future, you are most at risk. I hope you hear that. You are the ones most at risk at suicidal ideation, attempts, and death. So please go and do the transition seminars. Take your families they're transitioning to. They can help support you. Maybe your transition out of defense is a massive transition for your family, and different people have different responsibilities, and you can think about those things. Your families get support that you don't know exists. But you are most at risk and need to do the work now before you're in crisis, before you think you need it. Because I can tell you, the majority of phone calls I get are veterans who had worked in, some capacity and knew Pete or knew someone who knew someone. They're 18 months out. They've been sitting on their couch. They haven't been working out. They haven't been going to jiu-jitsu. They haven't been, and their wives or partners are going, oh my God, get them out of my house. They're miserable. They're doing nothing. You're not sleeping. You're not eating well. You're not working out. You're not doing all the things that kept you healthy while you were in the military. So and are all risk factors for being depressed, miserable, and at risk.
It's exactly everything you've just said, and you know it too. Exercise is so important for mental health, and it's so, for me, I live for it every day. Like I'm now, and I've told you.
Not everyone does. So go out and what the other thing we're learning, exercise, yes, and nature. So if you don't do exercise, go swim or put your feet in the water, sit next to it. Go stare up at the clouds and a tree. I know that sounds crazy. Just go sit on the edge of the woods and stare at it for an hour, and it changes your brain.
Absolutely. It's something that Rach Ranton, and she's been on the podcast.
She's so awesome.
Yeah, I caught up with her on Tuesday, and she said to me, she's like, going out into the water, she started surfing. Yep. She's like, I'm an ex-soldier. She's like, so I'm used to things being in my control. And she's like, going out in the surf, you're in water. You're in, you can't control what nature does with the waves and you can control it to a point, but at some point you've got to let yourself go and be vulnerable to whatever nature's going to throw at you. So I 100% agree with what you're saying with just get out and go and see nature and go and feel it and smell the fresh air and just be grateful that life is the greatest gift. It is the greatest gift of all. And, and people... Yeah.
I'm reading this book called Phosphorescence by Julia Baird. And no matter what you think of her politics or her reporting, the whole first several chapters talk about wonder, awe, and all this research that's been done on it. Like Dante, like all of these, Descartes talked about it, all of these old philosophers, and it through time, our Aboriginal communities have talked about it, our connection to the land, which, to white America or white Australia, you're like, yeah, I love going on a nature walk, bushwalk's great. Like, when you sit and listen to the earth, the research shows awe, wonder, nature, water change our perception of ourselves and the world. And there's evidence to prove it changes the way we are in the world. Yep. When I go up in a plane, I feel little and small, and it puts the world in perspective. Oh my God, so many things are insignificant. So many things are significant and important, but it just puts it all into perspective, and it changes the connections in your brain.
100%. And I want to ask you this because just before we finish up, and I want your opinion on this. So, in your mind and your opinion, we know the cost of what service to our country for veterans is. Have we done enough work, and have we really looked into how much toll it takes on the families and the sacrifice that the families have to make? And can you give us your opinion on that?
So there's not nearly enough research, but the thing about the people in the community know. So the people in the community, when they see another research project, get really angry because they're like, we know it. But the reality is, without the evidence, we're never going to get the right funding or show people this is the actual toll and these are the things that actually work. And when you're talking about limited resources, a country that has been suffering and loss of jobs and loss of businesses and COVID and, food on our shelves and we can't get supplies. I couldn't even get foundation the other day. It's not there. So when you're talking about limited resources and then you're looking at a government and saying, we need more, they're going, everyone and every community needs more. So if you want them to get behind it, you have to show them the evidence. So you have to do the research. So while we know it, it's like I've been doing yoga for decades. I can tell you, I know yoga changes my central nervous system, okay? Glad you men all got on board eventually. Glad you don't think that it's navel gazing anymore, okay? It took you a long time to get here, but you're here. But that is the perfect example of how, while the people who do it know, the rest of the world, the funding streams don't come in unless we have the evidence to show it. So we have to invest in research. So is that knowledge there? No. Do the people in our community know it? Yes. Do we need to do more research so we can get more funding and more support? Yes. So stop complaining about the research projects. Let's fund them so we can show what we already know, yes, so we can get more support, because that's what it's going to take.
It's sometimes, like you've said, and sometimes you've got to do the work behind and you've got to get the funding and that's where the work starts. It's the funding to then get these, and
be it grants, be it ESOs, show people that what you do does work. Do the, how was my well-being when I started your program? How was my well-being when I finished it? How is my well-being 6 months later?
Because like you said, and the work you do, that's why it's so important. If we're truly going to change the outcomes of this, like with the Royal Commission, with, everything, the work you do and others do and Gotcha for Life and all these mental health, if we truly want to change, we have to get the funding. We have to do these things because you know it yourself. If we truly want to change, we need to do this work, this research.
We've got to fund the right things because there's lots out there. There's lots out there, and we have to see what is actually having the most impact. And if it works for you, do it. But that doesn't mean that
it's going to work for everyone.
And it doesn't mean that you're going to get funding for it. But if it works for you, no one was paying for my yoga, but I'm going and doing it, I'll tell you. But we now know it works. Yeah. So, that it's invest in you and in ESOs, invest in the evidence-based work so that we know what works so that we can actually heal.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, Gwen, just to finish up, what are your plans going forward with Tom, Emily, and Lachlan, and what do you hope for the future?
I think it's to sit in it. Just to sit in it. I know that sounds ridiculous. One of the biggest lessons I've had in the last year, especially the last 12 weeks, is sitting in whatever it is I feel. You and I were talking about anger earlier. We feel it start, right? We feel it rising. Yeah. We feel it explode. Yeah. Do you ever realize when it finishes?
No.
Exactly. When you're sad, you sit on the couch and you're sad, you curl up, you watch Netflix, or you're depressed. Do you ever realize when that finishes? No, didn't either. So I was listening to a Brene Brown. I know a lot of you hate her. I love her. Podcast. And there were two scientists talking about a tunnel. Emotions are a tunnel. We are the train. The train goes through the tunnel. A lot of us want people to pull us out of the tunnel. We stop. We want that anger to go away. So we, pull a trigger. We want to rip ourselves out in the middle of the tunnel because we don't want to feel it anymore. So we oh no, I'm good. I'm fine. Move along. Not angry, not sad, not anything. Well, the sad part is if we rip ourselves out of the middle of the tunnel, we have to go back into the tunnel, be it today, 10 days from now, 10 years from now, and finish that emotion. That emotion must finish on its own. So the one thing I want from me, Emily, Lockie, and Tom is to be able to sit in our emotions, feel them from start to finish, not judge ourselves, not feel shame about them, and actually learn to live with, we don't have 7 emotions. We have something like 84, I heard the other day. I was like, what? I need to look into those. Feel them, watch them, see the cars go by, sit on the side of the road and go, oh, that's an interesting one. Oh, I'm feeling a little jealous right now. Oh, I feel a little sad right now. I'm just going to let that one ride instead of chasing it down the road like it's an ambulance and I'm a dog, or breaking out of it because I'm afraid. It's when my kids or I have anxiety or I've had panic attacks, and just going, sitting in it, going, okay, I'm having a panic attack. This sucks. Wow, this is big. Okay, I'm crying. Oh, there's all these tears running down my face. Isn't that interesting? And not being afraid of it. Yep. Just embracing it, letting it be, feeling it, letting it pass, and going, to the end of that, I'm done. I can get through anything. That's what my hope is for them, for me, and to take the shame and judgment out of every single moment of our lives.
It's very powerful, and I've followed you for a long time, and I'm grateful to be sitting across from you, and you've now become a friend and someone that I admire, and your story is one of true grit, determination, never giving up. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to finish with a quote that I believe sums you up. So this quote is, "The warrior fights with courage, not anger. You continue to fight for veterans. You continue to fight for veterans' families and also people who suffer from mental health." Gwen, thank you for the work that you continue to do and the strength that you just keep fighting for. I say it, the underdog. You keep fighting, and you are making the noise to go, hey, listen, we've got a problem here. You can't silence it. So thank you for the work that you continue to do, and thank you for coming on True Blue History and sharing your story and also your family story. Thank you, Gwen.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you feel like supporting us, you can now via our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/True Blue History, or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/True Blue History, and check out our new website, truebluehistory.com, for more great content.